everybody, what's good? JB here with another CyberInsight video. I'm really excited to introduce you to a new series that I'm putting together where I'm going to go and get some friends from Twitter. These are going to be folks that you may or may not know that specialize in different fields, both in IT, cybersecurity, InfoSec, across the whole tech gambit. We're going to get together and have some conversations talking about their path into the industry, some lessons learned, some of the resources that they heavily lean on to be successful in their specific fields. Today is going to be one of the first chats that we're going to do. The name of this new series is TCP Handshakes. TCP standing for Talented Cyber Professionals. This particular chat is going to be with a friend of mine named Mike, who specializes in InfoSec and cybersecurity compliance for different types of federal systems, specifically those dealing with cloud technologies. This is going to be a great conversation for those of you that want to get into cybersecurity or InfoSec, but maybe aren't quite sure which avenue or lane you want to go down, and you might not even be familiar with what InfoSec compliance is. Before we hop into the chat, please make sure you smash that like, subscribe, and notification bell. Every like helps, every follow helps. I appreciate it. Love all the feedback that I'm getting from everybody. Keep an eye looking out on Twitter and YouTube because I'm going to be putting out additional notifications for other guests that I'm going to be having on the TCP Handshakes here in the near future. All right, let's jump into the chat. Mike, how about you give you a little bit of an introduction about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Mike. I'm go by InfoSec MPZ over on Twitter, and I've officially been in InfoSec June last year, so not even a year and a half. And most of what I do is GRC compliance assessments, primarily for federal stuff, NIST SP 853 and 171. For FedRAMP, DoD, and we're hoping soon that CMMC gets everything sorted out so that the commercial world.
Everybody that knows anything about CMC is hoping that CMC gets figured out.
You're not wrong.
Yeah. So before you got into InfoSec, did you have a background in IT, or did you just kind of jump right into that?
No, no formal background, right? Nothing that we could ever put on to a resume or anything, but I've always been like a hobbyist with computers, build my own since in college. Building a home network a few years ago kind of pushed me towards wanting to shift out of my old career and over into InfoSec too. So that's sort of where the start came in, was hobbyism.
Sure. So with moving kind of into InfoSec, what drew you to kind of the compliance side of stuff? Because that's not something that people normally,
it's not glory.
The sexy InfoSec or cyber job. I have never heard anybody be like, man, I really want to go after that 853.
No, we don't wake up and think we're the glorious best. That's for sure. No. So my old job had actually shifted over from I did about 10 years in the kind of laboratory and certification, compliance, accreditation, all the ISO jazz words out there.
Yeah. Now, was that for like different types of pieces of hardware or software or?
So it was actually all sorts of products across, any spectrum you could think of. We've all got cell phones sitting beside us. I started out dealing with cell phone testing and certifying labs. I spent 2-3 years working almost exclusively with them. Then started getting into like labs that deal with automotive parts and testing, and then getting into people who would do like screw and bolt testing for the strength of steel. It goes on and on. Anything that can be tested just about does get tested for one reason or another.
So did you find that there's an awful lot of overlap from a like high level methodology standpoint when you're looking at the process of going through identifying kind of what it is that you're trying to test for and stepping through different different what the word is, different processes that might
it's that's one of the greatest skills actually that you could develop and take into a role like mine, is learning how to get the picture of, whatever your standard is, your framework, since we're using this language in this industry, knowing as best you can how the pieces fit together as a whole, and being able to go after them in a logical sense that you can kind of put this picture together at the end of the day and tell somebody else the story of this is what this client does, this is what they have in place, right? Because that's typically what audit and assessment is. You're trying to tell somebody's story to a third party.
Right. Now, in getting into that, you kind of mentioned a little bit about cloud before. And so, especially talking about FedRAMP and stuff like that, is that kind of what you just started off into? I mean, since you've only been in for a little bit, it pretty much has automatically been off the bat jumping into compliance for cloud, which obviously has a bit of a difference in the flavors and things like that you'd be doing compared to your normal like on-prem infrastructure stuff.
Sure. Yes. I'm going to say yes and no with it. I kind of mentioned during our warm-up chat that our two primary clients own their infrastructure, or at least rent it, and we can go see it in person.
Sure.
And me growing up in the era of the late 80s, 90s, 2000s, knowing things went into somebody else's data center was a very easy, logical jump and sort of mental acknowledgement that some folks who've been older in industry who I've seen around can't quite get that grasp.
Sure.
And it's, I don't know what to call that, other than just maybe I got the luck of the age and, seeing and growing up with it, and they just changed the lingo 10 years ago and say, ooh, it's the cloud.
Right. Which, really is just virtualization someplace else.
It is, right? It's more servers on a server.
Right, exactly. Hey, hold on for 1 second. I don't know if you can hear it from my side, but my Parrot is downstairs and yapping.
I can't hear it.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm still going to go turn off the light in the kitchen so that she chills out. She likes to get as much attention as she can, and so if the lights are on in the kitchen and nobody's down there, that means she needs to get some attention.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. So we were talking about how you kind of ended up in cloud compared to jumping in and having experience into the on-prem type of stuff. Now, with your company, do you do both? I mean, obviously, so it depends on the client, where you might end up doing a situation where they do have the on-prem and the cloud stuff within the same assessment?
Yes. So FedRAMP's requirements are, unless you're actually building off of an AWS or an Azure or somebody else who's already recognized through FedRAMP's program, the 3KO, us, we actually have to go and see the data center, whether it's a colo that they're renting space in, or in the case actually my boss is going down the road this week to go check somebody's data center, and I've joked with her, make sure she takes her respirator and Tyvek suit, right?
Hey, so honestly, in my data centers, we have so much PPE and hand sanitizer. Like if we ran out anywhere, that would be the first place I go to get some hand sanitizer, because they just got gallons of it and nobody's in the data center. So
hey, that's true. Yeah.
Right, yeah. When it comes to doing the FedRAMP assessments, is there particular types of tools that you use for any type of automation with that, or is it more so checklists and spreadsheets and questions and answers and that type of stuff?
So for the pen testing side of things, we have to have pen test assessments. Sorry, just my microphone.
Oh, no worries.
For the pen test side of the assessments, we have to pen test whether it's an infrastructure, a platform, or a software. We've got to include it in the assessment.
Gotcha.
Our pen testing team definitely uses automation tools, Burp, Nessus, any tool that makes sense for the environment that's being assessed out of Kali or Parrot, whatever their flavor of the month build is.
Yeah.
For the rest of it, though, when we get into the actual NIST controls themselves, about the most automation we're going to see from the assessor side is probably StigViewer out of DISA.
Yeah.
And that's if they're building off of Stigs.
Sure.
We might take a look at things through If they built off of CIS hardening, we might see CIS scores, but that's not something we would run from an assessing side. The vast majority of it is more kind of shoulder surfing and seeing somebody's configurations or walking through processes, looking at samplings of evidence, samplings of other configurations, firewall ACLs, all the good stuff.
Yeah. Now, have you found that there's any ways to help optimize that process ahead of time? Yeah, I'm just thinking from my own experience. I have been on projects where we would have maybe 5 or 7 different assessments every year, depending on the amount of systems that I was responsible for. And so the process of having a SCA assessment also at the same time as, a pen test or a red team is a lot of moving parts all at the same time to get that to come off successfully. So is there kind of some, lessons learned or best practices as far as doing that in an optimal way?
So I know from our perspective, and for the one ISACA conference I went to last fall, there's a lot of push, or at least a lot of chatter about automating compliance. Now, what that looks like, I've got to kind of throw up my hands and shrug. I've heard, one of our clients who we actually do some of their third-party assessments for them, their vendors and stuff. They use a product called Archer to keep track of some of this stuff.
I've heard of Archer before.
Yeah, and I've only seen it. I don't work in it personally. Yeah. We have plenty of people using Jira for tickets, ServiceNow for tickets, just kind of record or artifact generation, whatever term you want to use.
Yep.
A lot of the rest of it, though, if we think towards what this automation of compliance is almost going to rely upon the system itself, I think, right? So depending on what your particular firewall is, right? If it's possible and you can get a monthly script or a weekly script running off of this thing to dump your ACLs into a secure folder, right? Not an open S3 bucket.
Right.
But, okay, so here's week 1 of 2020. Here's week 2. Here's week 3. Here's week 4. And if this is a modest ACL and it's a couple hundred rules instead of a couple 100,000.
Yep.
You can say, hey, I know we've got this rule that went away here, and over here was the ticket in Jira, ServiceNow, whatever the case may be, right? Yep. It's starting to automatically generate a lot of these assessment or audit artifacts without needing to get people involved.
Sure.
These computers hopefully do the right things for us if we set them up correctly, and that frees us up to A, not make mistakes, and B, do the rest of our jobs, which is probably going to be more important to the companies we're working for, right?
Now, how do you see that? I guess that kind of overlays a bit with like continuous monitoring.
Yes. Right? Yeah.
So having... let me step back from that for a second. So from a continuous monitoring perspective, does that alter the way in which you approach an engagement from the perspective of you might not have to do a full assessment of things if things are documented, or for instance, you have those artifacts that have kind of been being collected the entire time?
So somewhat within FedRAMP, right? So FedRAMP breaks out this entire list of 800-73 controls, and depending across the 3-year period, you have a core set that's always looked at, and then some of the other ones which can be skipped for a year or two but have to be hit somewhere in this 3-year cycle.
Sure.
Now, in terms of how that ties in with continuous monitoring and the way continuous monitoring is expected by FedRAMP, we might have to hit certain controls every year that wouldn't normally be done every time based on the results of the monthly or quarterly submissions to their agencies.
And that's just based off of the priority of those controls, of them just being critical controls that need to be...
Priority as well as kind of results, right? If an agency or the FedRAMP board is seeing a lot of inconsistencies with inventory, scan results, lots of highs that just continue and continue and continue out of Nest scans or whatever it is, that's going to trigger red flags more so than compared to, hey, I missed a month of turning in something over here, right?
I got you. Yeah. So do you get your hands dirty at all with Nessus and all that jazz when it comes?
I've started to this year. Not really running scans per se for work.
Yeah.
But because of our clients have to do scans, vulnerability scans of their environment,
Yep.
I've started taking on more and more of that responsibility, going through scan results, comparing them over time, looking for kind of some of the hidden stuff that's down in those informational vulnerabilities.
So you can find a lot of good stuff down there. A lot of misconfigurations and things like that don't necessarily. Yeah.
TLS privileges, those are kind of the two big ones, which our last two assessments, something's been caught, and this isn't right. But why is it not a moderate or a high?
Now, are you also kind of as you're getting familiar with Nessus, are you using Security Center as well?
Not me personally, no. Again, because I'm not really running scans for them. Right now, we have our Pentest team who's doing that. We do like scans as a service or Kanban as a service.
Yep.
For clients who we don't assess.
Oh, okay, I got you. Yeah.
It's an impartiality requirement there for our program. But I've seen SC worked a bit through some of the clients.
Yep.
Primarily, I just do the normal local install of Tenable.
Well, if you do get a chance to get into it a little bit more, it is pretty interesting because it does kind of have a few different applications that are all kind of tied together, right? So you have your normal Nessus scanner, right? You have SC, which is kind of like your dashboard for all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But then it has log correlation engine, which is kind of a SIM light, if you will.
SIM light, yeah.
Yeah. And then NNM, which is a passive vulnerability scanner. You normally send like a span port of traffic in your network to that. And then it looks for different vulnerabilities based off of the traffic that it captures.
Nice.
So once you get kind of all of those all combined, then your dashboards within Security Center, you're actually going to get a lot more different types of vulnerabilities than just say your regular Nessus scan.
Yeah, because most of what everybody's looking for right now is individual host-based vulnerabilities. Not whether you're going to use, your Splunk or your SentinelOne or something else to do more of the network monitoring itself.
Yep. And you can pump all of that stuff out of that over to Splunk as well. So there is some value in that. Yeah. So since you've been kind of new to InfoSec, you said it's been about a year and a half?
A little under a year and a half, yeah.
What do you or what have you found from a benefit as far as being on social media? So
part of it's been seeing a lot of thought process and learning about things and stuff that wouldn't normally cross my radar just in the FedRAMP world.
Okay.
So it's definitely been beneficial seeing that. Obviously beneficial meeting folks. The industry I came from over in the lab accreditation world, it was very tiny. You kind of knew everybody already.
Sure.
And I've been here a year and a half, and I'll be lucky if I've scratched 2% of the people who do this work.
So I think I started doing kind of the Twitter, YouTube. Well, we'll go Twitter first. The Twitter IT/InfoSec circles and stuff like that. Probably about the same amount of time ago that you did. And I just didn't even know that it existed, really. I mean, so having worked in IT and cyber starting back in 2003, like the people that I knew were the people that I literally came into contact with and stuff like that. And so I wasn't really aware that there was all this vast information and people sharing different ideas and things like that. And I don't know. For me personally, I found it to be pretty amazing so far. To your point, you kind of get to meet a whole bunch of, different people from all over the place. And get to interact with folks that kind of would be on the periphery of your areas of responsibility.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like almost nobody who I've interacted with regularly, either or in person. I doubt I'd see them if I just kept my nose in the federal side.
Sure. And you probably wouldn't find anybody admitting to working in compliance on Twitter.
There's one or two, and there's everybody else who's complaining about their auditors, and we go back to what you originally asked way back when about the process and the high level, and it's. So I look at this, I'm like, I feel so bad for you guys. How come we couldn't get somebody like us? I mean, so my boss came from the same place I did, so 10, 12 years working with places who just hammered in, people skills, interviewing with the intent of actually getting cooperation and not making it an adversarial process.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, I think if it's articulated in a way that the folks are there to help the organization, right? It's like, out of this, we are going to provide you with some recommendations that will make things better for you versus, hey, you guys suck. What are you doing? Like, why is everybody in the domain admins group? Why is there no segmentation between any VLANs? Why is, and instead,
IoT is out there production.
Instead, kind of, dangle the carrot or the cookie or whatever. It makes things be a little bit more useful. At least that's the way I try to look at whenever I have to deal with any adversarial assessments or pen tests or things like that. It's like, I only know what I know, and I only have so much time to be able to find out the things that I don't know. So if some other folks can come in, and that's what they're specifically going to be working on for a few weeks, is identifying these things that if I had known about it, I would prefer to fix them, then that just, is kind of a symbiotic relationship. And I think it makes things a bit easier to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, our jobs, regardless of what we do, if we're pen testing, purple teaming, red teaming, coming in and helping a company out, we should be giving them something worth the money they've spent, right?
Oh, most definitely.
And, I mean, my lovely joke, I still need to make stickers. I excel at security because we're spending so bloody much time in spreadsheets getting reports ready.
Right.
But the reports as well as the in-person talks are hopefully the beneficial areas that we in compliance should be giving to clients, or the folks like you who have us come in and look at systems and try and say, hey, you're good here, you're passing here, but you can do a lot better, and here's how.
Sure. And that sure beats the situation compared to the organizations that go out and get a vulnerability assessment and all it is unauthenticated scans.
Actually, we talk about that, and I just remember last week I was having a conversation with one of our clients in their vuln scanning team. They didn't know to look down and what to look for in those informational results to see where they were having, problems with the authentication.
Oh, man.
So 400, 500 some hosts, and you get a couple dozen or 50 or 90 of them with no authentication and problems with a lot of your protocols or a lot of your services running. Yeah. You're not going to catch them if you're looking at your moderate size and criticals.
Wow.
So we spent half an hour walking them through. These are a lot of the things down here in the informationals your vuln team needs to start looking at. No, they're not going to be POAM items.
Right.
So, which is over long term. But they're things, like the TLS 1.0, right?
Yep.
If we're seeing that service still on, especially a federal system, that's problematic. If you've got SMB shares, which can be anonymously found, that's a big problem. It's an informational. It's not really just informational.
Right. Yep. And then that's when the tears come.
Yeah. It's like, hey, just go switch it off. You'll be okay.
Yeah. Unless it's something that is required on your SAN.
We had one client a while ago who had pretty much that same problem. Had to have S&P V1 for something.
Yep. Well, because I think in some scenarios you get into, depending on the version of Linux that you have, doesn't support the higher levels of SMB. And then I know that on 7 and 8, you're good. But I think some of the earlier ones, there were some issues with that. And I'm trying to remember, it was SMB with CIFS, I think, maybe.
Oh, yeah, there was something about that I saw on some RHEL 6 items. I don't remember what that is off the top of my head. I'm sure I could go look. I've got to see it somewhere around.
It's not good, whatever it is.
No,
you need to upgrade your
that
version
reminds
of
me.
Linux.
If you're listening to this, RHEL 6 is end of life this month. They're
Yeah.
done. You get no more security patches.
Yep. And that includes CentOS as well, if I remember correctly.
Yes,
right?
yeah, it's the commercialized version.
Yeah, so you're almost SOL at this point. So
Oh, yeah. Move over to 7, please. Or 8.
or get your poems in. Yes. No. As far as other types of community events, so we obviously met in person for the first time at B-Sides Nova. Was that the first cybersecurity conference that you've been to?
I would say officially the third. I did B-Sides DC last October.
Okay. Yep.
That was the first one I'd really gone to. I've got my ShmooCon shirt. I got into Shmoo with the tickets this year.
There you go.
I did. It was miraculous.
Yeah.
And then Nova was the third one, and then the world went all to hell.
So that's pretty funny. You and I actually hit up all of the same conferences, but we didn't know each other at that time. So
that's true. Yeah.
I did B-Sides DC, which was great, except for the cell phone reception in the basement, which for me sucked. So it was kind of constantly going back and forth and having to charge my phone because it was draining the battery the whole time. And then I actually went to my first ShmooCon as well. I'm trying to remember how I got the ticket because I definitely didn't get it in the 7 seconds that everybody had available.
No, I was on a kind of a ticket share group, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I think that's how I got mine too. Or I just put out a tweet being like, "Somebody help me! I'll buy your ticket." I think that's pretty much how it happened. Yeah. So what were your thoughts on the B-Sides so far since you've been to 2 of them?
I liked Nova more, but I think it was because by that time I had a better idea of kind of what to expect and what to pick to go listen to and learn from. Sure. So it's absolutely nothing at all trying to like bash DC. You know, a janitor who did the opening at DC was a great talk.
It was.
I remember listening to something from the folks at MITRE on the attack framework, I think after lunch.
Yep.
And that stuck with
me. That one as well. That was good.
And then the other ones, I know I was kind of in and out of some of them. I did, what was it, one of those, not really an escape room they did upstairs. Did you do that, though?
Mm-mm.
So there was like this little escape room or some sort of challenge room or something like that upstairs. But it was a little murder mystery that you go and find clues under stuff. And so, my 2 buddies who I was there with, we went up there and met a couple other people and did this room and got out. I think the second fastest time they had all day.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was fun, though.
So for me, I love B-Sides. I started going, I'm trying to remember, probably 3 years ago, I think? No, 2 years ago. Yes, 2 years ago. The one that they had at the Washington, it's not Memorial, but like the lodge. Oh, dang it. What is it? The Masons Lodge that they have in Alexandria that is related to George Washington. It's up on the hill in Alexandria. Anyway, it was beautiful, beautiful spot.
Okay.
So that was my first one, and I absolutely loved it. And as soon as it was done, I was like, I want to help volunteer for this. So then got in touch. Yeah. So I volunteered for this last one in Nova, which was cool. I got to do like CFP reviews and stuff like that. So that was a lot of fun. The hard thing for me, though, was kind of getting into the mindset of realizing I'm not going to be able to see everything I want to see.
Yeah, there were a number of them that were, oh gosh, there's 2 or 3 of these things. Which one do I go to? Which one do I spend my time on?
That, and it's exhausting throughout the whole day.
It was, yes.
It's so much going back and forth. And then you also, you end up meeting friends, right?
Yeah.
And meeting new friends. And it is a lot of interaction and moving back and forth and stuff like that. So I kind of had to adjust my mind to be like, look, I'm going to try to get to 4 of the 6 talks that I really want to see. And if it happens, it happens. If not, then, the networking is going to be, as worth as much as the talks and stuff like that.
Oh yes, yeah.
It's kind of interesting because for me, the conferences that I've been going to before that, I'd gone to Black Hat like 6 or 7 years in a row, and so that was all on the company expense. They'd pay for,
of course,
they pay for the trip, the hotel, 4 days of training, and then the 2-day conference.
That's not bad. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was kind of one of those things where nobody was asking to go, and I asked, and since nobody else asked, they're like, yeah. And then kind of once you do it once, then it becomes a thing.
Yeah.
And I just kept doing it. And then, of course, I started my own company, and then so I've continued to do it, but I stopped paying for the conference portion and just pay for the classes.
Training.
Yeah, because the training is awesome. I've had some great classes. I went to one with John Strand for active defense. I've been to some OSINT ones, some other like OSCP classes and stuff like that. So I normally try to go for stuff that's not necessarily directly aligned with what I do day to day, but kind of expands the space a little bit.
Yeah.
Around that.
Yeah. See.
But big difference between the conference at Black Hat and these B-Sides Novas. I just find that the information that's at the B-Sides Novas is much more relatable and actionable. Like
I think so.
You're going to go and you're going to watch somebody talking about, specific ways to tune certain types of tools that are generally used in all environments, right? Or something like that. Compared to Black Hat, where it's somebody's thesis project on using a new version of BGP hijacking with very, very specific, scenarios that nobody ever sees. And it's just like, okay.
You might see an APT used a couple years down the road.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, I get it. It's really cool, but I'm not getting anything out of this that I can take back and use somewhere.
You get more theoretical, it sounds like. And that's between that, what I've heard is, so I've never been out to summer camp. I wanted to go this year. Instead, I had to throw my money at swag.
Yeah.
We all did pretty much. But
hopefully next year, fingers crossed.
It's on my radar as long as it doesn't cross my wife's birthday.
Okay.
So what I'd heard also with RSA is that it's a very vendor heavy. Or excuse me, not RSA, but Black Hat.
It is. So the best part of it is the 4 days of training. And then on that last day is when all of the suits come in on the airplanes and it just, gets ridiculous and just kind of like, oh, okay, I've had enough. I hate Vegas now. I'm ready to go, because you've been there for 5 days at that point. And you're like, I still got another 3 or 4 days here. What am I going to do?
Now, did you do besides Las Vegas?
I have not. I would love to, but the problem is B-Sides Las Vegas is Monday, Tuesday. And so the training courses at Black Hat are Friday, Saturday, Monday, Tuesday.
Oh, okay.
So if I take a 4-day class, which normally the 4-day classes are much better than the 2-day classes, in general, I'm sure that there's a few exceptions to that, but normally you're going to get really, in depth into stuff. I wouldn't be able to hit the B-side stuff, but I would really like to go to B-side. So I think one of these years I'll break it off and just do
a dog coming down the steps.
Oh, you hear him?
Yeah, no. So I know you had mentioned there you started to volunteer at B-Sides, and I had started actually earlier this year volunteering with the Pros versus Joe's crew.
Okay.
So they did their sort of at-home CTF thing since nobody could get together in person towards the end of May, and did that. Had a lot of fun with the team, even though we scored last of the 4. But we got on some firewall shenanigans and a couple other shenanigans there that caught the attention of the organizers, and they extended actually probably about 5 or 6 invites to people across different teams, and I was one of them to join their volunteer staff.
Oh, okay, awesome.
So
you're gonna keep doing that with them, you think?
Yeah, definitely. And I know, with their, so to speak, CEO, since they are a formal nonprofit, is definitely, speaking highly of getting together besides Las Vegas and running the in-person events there. And yes, lots and lots of fun.
Oh, awesome. So as far as folks getting into InfoSec, since you kind of just done that recently, is there any particular tools or resources that you would recommend or point folks to that has been helpful to you, or you think would be helpful in general?
I actually just got this question from somebody last week, an old coworker who was thinking about switching into the industry. My personal start, other than doing things like building computers and tinkering at home with stuff, obviously those are good things to have.
Yeah.
My biggest point to him was study network first.
Sure.
Whether or not you go for a cert for networking,
Yep.
That's up to you. But the knowledge in there, it seems like 90% of the more detailed things within the entry-level certifications, entry-level positions, discussions, all revolves around the network and the communication between the devices.
I would completely agree with that. And I kind of recommend the same thing to folks in general, whether they want to get into InfoSec, cyber, or IT. Getting kind of that base level, network plus level knowledge. To your point, you don't necessarily need to go get a network plus, but understanding the information that covers is going to make things be a lot easier once you start to learn other things.
Yeah, it's just in our world today, especially, 25 years ago might have been a different thing, but in the last 25 years, you don't do anything with computers that doesn't involve communication.
Right.
Everything from getting malware onto a device to scanning an enterprise network, reading it, getting to your Netflix, your Gmails. Yep. Everything's all about communication, learning how the basic steps, how packets are formed versus frames, all that stuff is very important.
Yep. Understanding what's the expected result versus when something's jacked up, both from an operational perspective or from a security perspective, and being able to recognize that something isn't right definitely kind of aligns with having that mindset.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So do you have any other things that you want to plug, or any other things going on that are worth mentioning?
I don't know, not terribly much for me. I've got my Pentests Plus exam coming up this Friday, and I have no idea if I'm ready for that or not.
Okay. What have you been doing for prep for that?
I've got, which book? I've got you can't see it in my camera, but I've got the white book back here, and then I've got the gold book from, who did the gold book? It was normally like you get a lot of the Mike Myers series.
Okay.
There's some gold, bronze color covers, but I've got 2 books. Did some labs through CyberInsight and Try Hack Me, I think was the other one.
Okay, cool.
So
do
just trying to
they actually have like Pentest Plus specific labs at Try Hack Me? Or you were just kind of playing around with?
So I think it was right towards the end of my subscription. I dropped it just to put some money into some other things.
Yeah.
It had like a path for Pentest Plus, and it was going through things like Nmap, which I'd done for the size of Nests, which I've been now playing heavily with for work. Got into Burp, which I hadn't actually dove into yet. Cool. So it was a good introduction and a good run through with how Burp works at a higher level.
Okay.
Traffic.
Did you get to use the Pro version or the regular version with that?
Burp Suite, I think it was just the regular community.
Yeah, cool. Well, good luck on the test.
Thank you.
I've heard good things about it, so
we'll see.
Yeah,
I know I always worry most about their practical stuff, and I was surprised by how not heavy it was for the CISA exam in the spring, the CYSA.
Okay.
But I'm kind of not counting on luck carrying through, and it's going to be something that's going to blow my mind right off the bat on Friday.
I wonder how much of a carryover of information there is between those two.
Study material, there seems to be some.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of stuff in there like Python scripting or Ruby scripting that you just don't touch on the defensive cert side.
Sure.
Now, things like what are these types of phones? What do they look like? What's the scan telling you?
Right.
They're going to cross over. You're just looking from different perspectives, right? Defense versus offense, and exploitation versus remediation. But we'll see. Hopefully there'll be some good amounts of crossover, and some things I'll figure out based on what I know.
Cool. Well, I think that is all the questions that I have. I didn't have anything else. And if you don't have anything else, then we can wrap this thing up.
All right, man. I definitely appreciate you talking and reaching out.
So that wraps up one of our first TCP Handshakes chats. I hope it provided you with a little bit of background and maybe some additional knowledge of an area of InfoSec that you might not be familiar with. Please make sure that you go and follow Mike on Twitter. If you have any recommendations for additional folks that you'd like me to sit down and have a chat with, drop those down in the comments down below. Also, if you have any other recommendations for other topics that you'd like me to cover, drop those down below as well. As always, make sure you smash that like, subscribe, and notification bell. Keep an eye out on the channel. I do have some additional practical lab videos that are going to be coming out soon. We have been working on the Network Plus practical labs, which I still do have a few more of those. But I'm going to start rolling out some Security Plus and some CCNA practical labs. So I think you're going to really enjoy those. All right, go get at it. Have a good week, and we'll talk soon. All right, bye.